This little girl has a very strange habit. She always carries a small notebook in her hand, recording the lies told by adults. Recently, the number of lies she's had to write down has been growing because her parents are going through a divorce. Her notebook is filled with entries like Dad cheated with a Paralympic athlete, and Mom keeps saying they're not arguing, just having loud discussions. The latest lie she wrote down is how her parents told her to lie to her grandpa, saying everything is fine at home, and not to mention that they're getting a divorce and have already separated. This really worries Lottie, especially since they're about to travel to Scotland to celebrate Grandpa's birthday, and they'll be staying at his house for a while. She's not sure if she can keep up this lie. Lottie's sister, Jess, is also troubled about the trip because she can't decide which of her rock friends to bring along to Scotland. But bringing Eric would mean leaving Norman behind. So Jess insisted on taking all the stones with her. In her eyes, the stones are classified as good or bad. Doug initially wanted to persuade Jess not to bring all the stones, but Jess's stubborn nature led her to hold her breath as soon as her father refused. She wouldn't compromise even if it meant fainting. Doug had no choice but to bring all of Jess's stone friends. In contrast, his son Mickey was much easier. A chatty kid who was satisfied as long as he could talk and be praised for his idol, Odin from Norse mythology. Mickey spent his days running around with a sword, firmly believing in his idol's existence. Finally, the family set out for Scotland to visit Grandpa, but they had to keep stopping because Doug and Abby would start arguing over minor disagreements. To keep the kids from hearing, they had to argue outside the car while reassuring the children it was just a loud discussion. The next morning, they arrived in Scotland and were greeted by Doug's older brother Gavin and his family. Doug had always disliked Gavin, a sycophantic financier who loved to show off and issue orders. As soon as Doug arrived, Gavin began bragging about the wireless smart system in his house, but his boasting seemed ineffectual in front of the kids. Seeing that the kids didn't understand his advanced equipment, he began to boast about his job. Gavin's conversation with the kids amused their grandfather. Having not seen the three children for a long time, he was in exceptionally good spirits. He was especially fond of the well-behaved and thoughtful Lottie. They spent a long time talking in his secret storage room, discussing everything from childhood memories to his cancer. From their conversation, the grandfather sensed that Doug's family must be hiding something. However, despite his probing, Lottie kept the secret. She was just very confused about why adults tell children not to lie while they themselves lie all the time. Is lying ultimately good or bad? However, although Lottie kept her parents' secret, Doug and Abby started arguing again the next morning, just like their daily routine. The floor upstairs was thumping loudly, and Grandpa downstairs was wondering what was going on with Doug and Abby. Before he could ask Doug and Abby, Mickey had already inadvertently given away the secret. Upon learning that his son and daughter-in-law were going through a divorce, Grandpa was displeased but simply didn't have the energy to deal with it. As he grew older, all he wanted was for his family to stop arguing so he could rest properly. However, the home was not a place where he could truly relax. Today was Grandpa's birthday, and Gavin insisted on organizing a grand celebration. But the lavish party was far from what Grandpa wanted. So, he decided to take the kids to visit his friend Dolores instead. Dolores had many animals, which delighted the children. Mickey wanted to race an ostrich, while Jess held an ostrich egg, pondering how such a large egg could come from an ostrich. After the race, Mickey came back and had a whimsical thought. He wondered if it would be possible to put the ostrich egg back inside the ostrich. Jess was very impressed that Dolores could take care of so many animals by herself, but Dolores smiled and said that her girlfriend also helped, so they learned a new word, lesbian. These lesbians live in a magical kingdom called Lesbia, where women don't need boyfriends and only love other women. After leaving Dolores's house, Grandpa took them to the beach. There, Lottie finally couldn't hold it in any longer and told her grandpa all the details of her parents' divorce. Grandpa no longer wanted to deal with the adults' troubles anymore. Taking the innocent children to the beach he loved most as a child, that's what he wanted the most now. When Lottie, racing with the seagulls, discovered a string of English letters carved into a rock, Grandpa was reminded of his brother. The letters are their initials and were carved here when they were young. They used to love this beach and often came here to play. But when they grew up, his older brother joined the military and died in the anti-fascist war, while Grandpa, the younger brother, was spared from combat and survived. Following this story, Grandpa shared his thoughts on death with the children, or rather, his wishes for his own funeral. He said he hated traditional funerals, hated being buried, and hated a large group of people arguing over funeral matters. If possible, he hoped for an ancient Viking funeral, like his ancestors, where he would be placed on a burning boat and sent out to sea. The children seemed to understand only partially, but Grandpa knew he could never have a Viking funeral. His sons would certainly oppose the idea, especially his eldest son, Gavin, who would be the first to object. Gavin would probably say, What kind of idea is that? He would insist on arranging a grand funeral instead of a foolish Viking one. When the topic of the funeral came up, the children excitedly wanted to play a funeral game, with Grandpa naturally taking on the role of the deceased. However, as they continued their play, they were surprised to find they couldn't wake him up. Although Grandpa could still joke with the kids at this time, he knew deep down that his days were numbered. Recently, the pain in his body had been increasing, and he often found himself in a daze. While he was enjoying the sun and sending the kids off to catch crabs, he seemed to see his brother arriving from the sea, holding a soccer ball and looking just like the young man he had been when he left. He knew his brother had come to pick him up. This has to be the craziest summer ever. The three children found that their grandfather, who had taken them to the beach for fun, couldn't be woken up no matter how hard they tried. Lottie, the eldest, had received some scouting training at summer camp. Following her training, she carefully checked Grandpa's pulse and pupils, and ultimately confirmed that he was dead. The sudden news left the children stunned. They stood beside Grandpa, helpless, unsure of what to do next. There was no one around, and Grandpa's phone was dead. Lottie instructed her younger siblings to stay with Grandpa and not to move. Then she ran back home to get help. The adults at home were busy preparing a birthday party for Grandpa. Lottie's father, Doug, was even arguing with his brother Gavin, whom he had never gotten along with. As Lottie looked at the chaotic birthday party preparations, she finally understood why Grandpa hated the endless arguments among adults and took them to the beach. She recalled Grandpa saying before he died that he wanted a peaceful Viking funeral. She knew the adults who cared about formality would definitely not agree. So she came up with a bold idea. She decided to fulfill Grandpa's wish and hold the Viking funeral he had always wanted. Therefore, she sneaked into the house, took Grandpa's favorite Scottish shirt and his collection of Viking brooches, and raced back to the beach to tell her siblings about her decision. They decided to just go for it. They started by building a Viking ship. Speaking of a Viking ship, they had only seen one briefly in a museum. They could only carry logs, relying on their memory of the Viking ship and a little experience from art class to cobble together a simple raft. They then carefully used the rolling logs to move Grandpa onto the raft. The children not only decorated the raft nicely, but Mickey also gave Grandpa his beloved sword, and Jess contributed her favorite stone that had accompanied her for a long time. Subsequently, the children dragged gasoline from the car and poured it onto the raft. Then they struck a match. As the raft drifted away, they bid their final farewell to Grandpa. After the sea burial of Grandpa, the three kids walked back home on foot. And then they recounted in detail everything that had happened on the beach to the adults. The adults were shocked. They rushed to the beach, but Grandpa's body had already drifted far away. They couldn't believe those kids had burned Grandpa just like that, not even leaving any ashes behind. The adults were busy preparing for Grandpa's birthday party, but the kids ended up holding the funeral for him by themselves at the beach. However, since the deed was done, to protect the children, they announced Grandpa's death but kept secret about the children's funeral arrangements. When the guests heard about Grandpa's passing, they were immediately stunned. One of Grandpa's old friends, who had traveled from New Zealand, learned the full story from the children's mother, Abby. Unfortunately, this old man happened to be hard of hearing and had a loud voice. The guests who had planned to leave were even more confused. Chaos ensued at the scene. The kids accidentally triggered the house's smart system, broadcasting a video of Aunt losing control and smashing things in a small supermarket during the party. Their aunt, a full-time housewife, had long been under the domineering control of her husband, Gavin. Over time, she developed depression, which led to the outburst in the supermarket. Before the family could figure out how to handle the chaotic situation, reporters swiftly gathered at their doorstep. Grandpa, once a famous athlete and well-known locally, had been burned by the kids. Gavin, a millionaire, had his wife lose control in a supermarket. Reporters dug deeper and found out that the parents of the troublesome children, who cremated Grandpa, were getting a divorce. The media speculated that the kids' actions were a result of inadequate parental discipline leading to psychological issues. The family quickly became the media's headline. A large crowd gathered outside, preparing to broadcast their every move. Terrified, they dared not even open the curtains and huddled inside, attacking each other. Eventually, Mickey couldn't stand it anymore and ran outside to explain everything to the reporters. Doug, wanting to protect his son, followed him, but his clumsy explanations only made things worse. Abby, unable to watch any longer, also went outside. The media focused on their marital issues. Facing the flashbulbs, they decided to confront the situation head-on. They said that if the media believed their marriage was problematic, so be it. But they were just ordinary people who made ordinary mistakes and were trying their best to overcome life's challenges while protecting their three children. They publicly revealed their children's names and left the rest to the police. While the police conducted their investigation, the adults stopped their complaints. Gavin learned about his wife's illness for the first time, and Doug and Abby began to listen to their children seriously. They reevaluated Grandpa's words and confirmed that his wish was indeed to have a Viking funeral. They were ashamed that they were so unreliable that Grandpa's last wish was fulfilled by the three children. They accepted the fact of Grandpa's sea burial and, following his wishes, ceased their arguments. They held a simple funeral on the beach, and as they sang and danced, the rifts within the family seemed to heal. After the vacation ended, both the police and the family confirmed that the children just organized a Viking funeral for Grandpa, not a burning to death. And the families gradually began to change. Gavin learned to let go of his controlling tendencies and became more considerate of his wife, while Doug and Abby ended their marriage amicably. As for the kids, Jess thought that the next time someone died, they shouldn't just set them on fire. Mickey felt that his vacation had been much more fulfilling than his best friend's. Lottie seemed to have learned more, though she wasn't sure exactly what. She just remembered Grandpa's words and tore up the notebook that recorded the lies told by the adults. And so, the movie comes to an end. What We Did on Our Holiday is a heartwarming comedy that reminded me of Little Miss Sunshine. Both films feature a highly chaotic family that finds reconciliation by the end. Although the movie boasts a cast of well-known actors, the standout feature is undoubtedly the three children. Their perspectives make the film more watchable and elevate its theme. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section. See you in the next movie.